Good evening, everybody, and welcome back to the Coach's Corner. We got a fun show for you tonight. We're going to talk about brain strain or overthinking on the field, as well as in training. We're going to kind of cover this from a number of different angles. With me, I have Duke Sean, one of our coaches tonight. I think Duke Sven is going to be joining us a little bit later. I think he's still connecting in, but we'll see what happens when he comes in. All right, so I'm sure everybody has had an experience with overthinking on the field. I know I have. I've had it interrupt the tournament performance, melee performance, you name it, even with training. So we're going to kind of get into this a bit, and we're going to segment this off in a couple of ways. Firstly, we're going to talk about being overwhelmed mentally day of the tournament. Like now you're in a fight, or you're about to start a fight, and you're overthinking. We're going to kind of go at it from that part first, and then we'll get later on to how overthinking can stress your training and make your training be less effective. But till we get started, thanks Duke Sean for joining us, and Sven, welcome. Glad you could connect up. Let me get you unmuted here. I think you're muted.
No, I'm muted myself. Sorry about being late. Been busy.
No problem. Thank you for joining us, and sorry about the time confusion there. Let me get to switch our modes here, and we'll go to this one. All right, so we're gonna cover first the overthinking and the mental strain of tournament, or now it's performance time. You got your armor on, you're ready to face your opponent. The overwhelming urge is to let your mind get too much in the way. Sean, maybe you could lead off by talking about that.
Yeah. So, in a sport where the highest levels of execution are no less than 80% mental. I mean, ours is much more a mental sport than it is a physical sport, just like many other martial arts are. I mean, there's in the beginning stages of fighting, there's a heavy emphasis on the physical part, because what we do is not exactly intuitive to your body. So, we're trying to teach our bodies how to do these things in the beginning, but at the higher levels of execution, it is all a mental game. And nowhere is that more relevant than in the tournament, regardless of what the tournament is, whether it's crown or a baronial defender or what have you. Tournament is the time to execute, and there's so much pressure that we put on ourselves, and most of it is internally generated, and there may be external factors involved in that, but it is mostly internally generated. And even the stuff that is externally generated, how we deal with those factors really determines our execution on tournament day. And I've mentioned on here a lot that one of the things about tournament in particular is that that's your one and done, right? Most tournaments are like a double elimination. And, you're allowed to make one mistake, but you make a second mistake and all of a sudden you don't get to play anymore. And, we want to play more, right? And because there is that, now it matters more than it does at practice. And that's one of the things we get to practice all the time, is this kind of do-over mentality where, we lose a fight and then we can say, well, it doesn't matter, because it's just practice, and, and we can just go on. But when you get into a tournament, all of a sudden you can't play anymore, then it matters. And the external factors and how we deal with all of the strain really comes into play in tournaments in ways that it just does not in practice.
Sure. Sven, would you like to comment?
That's pretty spot on. I think what a lot of people miss is that they do a lot of practicing for fighting and then pelling and different things, but they don't practice the tournament situation. We do. We tell people to have like mock tournaments, or get used to that adrenaline dump that you get from fighting, and that helps you focus on the day. You're not so much a new experience; it's something you've done before. And you'll see people do mental training where they go through it and they talk about the tournaments, what they'd like to do, and then just get you exposure in that experience. I find that helps a lot. Like, because the first people take away that nervousness. On that, Sean's pretty spot on.
Cool. You know, one of the things back when I started, I loved practice. I loved going to practice, and we didn't do any drilling. It was all just sparring. And I found that was a very enjoyable experience, but I was not an inherently competitive person. I guess I was, but it didn't come out. By the time I went to a tournament, I was just a bundle of nerves, way overthinking just about everything. And to be honest, I didn't enjoy it. And because I hadn't built that bridge between, all right, what's it like to actually just spar without the mental pressure, without the strain, of okay, now it matters. Now, if you get hit once or twice, you're out. I just enjoyed the sparring. And after a couple of years of that, I had comments back from other fighters that, Tristan, you're really good at practice. When we spar, you're amazing, but you get to the point where the nerves come in and the pressure comes on, and you don't do anywhere near as well as you do on the sparring field. And, of course, how do you solve that? You solve it by, okay, how do I mentally reorganize how I approach those two different venues? And really, to me, it came down to the stakes. And anybody who learns to play poker will tell you the same thing. If you want to learn to be a good poker player, for one thing, you're not playing the cards. Yes, you have to learn the odds and whatnot about the cards, but you're playing the other players. You have to read them, and you have to do it under a lot of stress. And if you play for just chips, or you play online where it doesn't cost you any money, you're just like a kamikaze. You'll just make stupid plays, and you're throwing cards around and stuff, and you're having fun, but you're not really learning how to play poker. You're not learning how to win poker against other players. Only when you put the ante on the table, and that ante actually stings you some. Like if you're a millionaire and you're playing nickel poker, you'll just be the same kamikaze that any normal person would be with plastic chips. So the idea that when we go to a tournament, the same thing happens mentally. That suddenly it matters. You don't want to lose, and you wind up, different things happen to your mind. Different things therefore happen to your body, because your body follows your mind, and you wind up being a whole different fighter. The real goal of practice is to try to practice much in the same way you're going to perform when it comes time, when the pressure's on. And that means, cutting out I got hit, that's no big deal, or it stings a little bit. It matters. It should matter that your defense is solid, that your offense is doing what it needs to do, that you're not screwing around and just having fun. And that's, if there was a two-edged sword, I think, to SCA fighting, one is it's a lot of fun. Just going out and swinging stick is a blast. It's a great time. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with that. In fact, I think that's a crucial part. You do need to be having fun, but don't have so much fun that you're being careless or reckless. If you're training to actually be competent, not get hit, and be able to land your shots, there needs to be that, what would you call it? Maybe urgency that your defense has to be shored up and your offense has to be working well. Sean, would you like to continue that?
Yeah. I mean, especially the poker analogy, I think it's really good. When you're playing poker like that, again, at some point, you're not playing against the cards. You're playing against the people. And initially you need to learn, how to play those cards and what they all do, and the probabilities and all that. But at some point you're playing against the people. You're not playing against the cards. And that thing you were saying where the ante has to sting. I mean, there has to be some skin in the game, as it were. And for our tournaments, we were talking about some of those external factors that kind of come into it, that there's just regular life stuff that happens, bills and relationships and your job and, all these other things that if you're worrying about those other things, that's going to give you a mental overload that you may not be able to to overcome. And at the very least, when you are unable to kind of leave those, check your baggage at the door, when you're unable to do that, you're not able to fight free. And Tristan was talking about, when you're fighting at practice, having a good time doing it, and then all of a sudden when there's more stakes on the line, that we start getting these internal pressures of performance anxiety and the need to perform for what reason. Again, me and Tristan talked about half hour before we go live, and it was awesome. But it's doing well so I look good for my night, or doing well so I look good for my lady, or I have to win this tournament because this is going to be, we just had Vsct 50 coming up next year, and now a lot of those crowns are here, but a lot of people that want to be King Vsct 50, and you just get wrapped up in all of what it all means, and it is draining. It is absolutely, it's frustrating. And when you get caught up in all things, it prevents you from just being and be able to just execute just like you do at practice, and execute for the sake of having a good time. And we talked about this a couple of weeks ago on one of our episodes. Forget about the win crown part, right? Forget about winning the tournament, because all of the stuff and what that means, that's all going to get worked out after the tournament. If you get wrapped up in that while you're executing, you're not fighting free. You're not fighting the best example. You're not fighting what you've trained yourself to fight as, and so you're not really executing the truest representation who you are as a fighter, and that's going to kill you, and that's part of that drain that we're talking about.
Definitely. And I think,
Sven, you got some on that?
Yeah, Sven, go ahead. He's just shaking his head. No, go. And I want to address this a little bit, because the external influence will always be there. You'll always have your consort. You'll always have other people, your friends, that want to see you succeed. You'll always have those things. So although you do want to show respect to them, certainly you can't just say, well, I don't care what you all think, and throw that out completely. But you have to compartmentalize it. Say, yes, I do want to do right by, my consort, my household, my friends, whoever's supporting you, all those people that are like, I really want to see you win. Don't blame them for wanting to see you do well and hoping that you do well. That's a compliment. But set it aside and don't let it distort your mental clarity. And that's kind of a switch. And I think if there was one thing about practice, that once you start getting down at least some fundamental basics, really what practice is the ability to learn practicing switching that switch, turning it from off to on and on to off and off to on when it needs to be there. And I don't mean just the on in terms of I'm going to go annihilate whatever is in front of me. It's I'm going to fight the best game that I can. And that includes, and this was just my formula, I always took it kind of personally when I got hit. I would always say, Tristan, you just screwed up. You let somebody hit you. This is the worst habit you can ever build. Stop doing that and get your mind right. I could go as light as I wanted to on offense if I had so much more experience than my opponent at a practice. I'm not going to just blow them out of their boots by throwing, everything I knew how to throw, but I needed to make sure that they did never hit me. Of course, when you're training somebody versus when you're sparring, things can be a little different. You can actually let them hit you. If you become impervious to them, like their offense never succeeds, you will actually inhibit their learning. So there's a difference between being a training partner and being a sparring partner, if that makes sense. But there's always that balance of, if you get hit, it should be because you either it really should only be you purposefully let that person hit you. Your reflexes and your blocking mechanics or dodging mechanics should stop them from actually making contact with you. That's a habit that you need to burn into your system in order to have that happen. But you know, and I've seen fighters kind of get grumpy when they have people come up and say, wow, I'd really love to see you win this crown, or I'd really love to see you win this tournament, or they wish them well. Never get grumpy with people that want to support you. It's out of love that they're showing that to you, and you should at least respect it, but make sure you don't let it overwhelm you either, because it can, if you think too much about the expectations of others, you can tear down your own game. Some comments on that, or
yeah, I mean, I can tell you, I was going to say, as well intentioned as that is, it usually doesn't help. You know, people are trying to help, and they're trying to be supportive. And when you're talking about the people that are telling you that I really want you to win this tournament and that sort of thing, like I said, that it is well intentioned, and people are thinking they're being supportive, but a lot of times it really doesn't help. It just puts more strain on what you're doing. You know, like Tristan said, I mean, that's not the time to tell them that you're not helping. I mean, you know, people are doing their best to be supportive, and really, you just have to say thank you. You just have to acknowledge that people want you to do well, and you have to say thank you, and then you have to get back to your training, you know, and let your training take over, and, you know, train yourself to execute at that level, and be okay with the outcome, as long as you put out your best fight, you know, because I know, you know, one of the takeaways, you know, after a list is I can handle being beaten by somebody who was just better than me, right? I'm okay with that. I mean, I'll you know, tip my hat, I'll do respect to somebody that was harder than I did and trained more than I did, and was just better. Yep, when you legitimately get outfought, I can deal with that. What I cannot deal with as much is not putting out my best effort, right? If I know that I had underestimated somebody or took a fight for granted and ended up getting killed for it, you know, that's on me, and that's something that I have a harder time dealing with, because I know that I did not execute my absolute best. Opponent for me to execute my absolute best, especially in a tournament.
Well, that kind of opens the door to the next subject, which is related, and this is another external factor that brings on mind stress. Is you're dealing now with somebody who's maybe always beat you. You know that they're a ton better than you are, and you have in your mind this wall of fear that keeps you from being able to do your best, even in the hopes that you might be able to prevail, or at least give your best game. And maybe with you two both being as accomplished as you are, it's been a while since you've had this, but or maybe you don't even remember, you know, that time when you go out and you step out and just like, I know exactly what's about to happen, and I'm about to get lit up like a Christmas tree. But I think that that's a common thing. I mean, I remember it happening, you know, repeatedly. It was never pleasant. But what I realized after the fact, long after the fact, was, yes, there was a little bit of external influence, which is my opponent is much better than I am. But what my brain turned it into was this huge mountain that I could just not climb. And only when I started to realize, okay, I'm doing most of the work here of putting an obstacle in my own way, did I start to have success against people that were better than me. Comments? Sven, are you muted?
Yeah, I'll go. Yeah, so I think for like how I approach tournaments and everything, and I tell my guys, I work with a lot of people who come from America and different things, is that self-doubt, that thing is your mind. It's a byproduct of being unprepared, you know. So if you have an approach or something that works for you and how you approach your tournaments, you can slowly hone in and get rid of those extraneous things that bother your mind, that, you know, that worry you. And routine is a good way to get rid of those, and just know that you've practiced and done all the things you can do. I find the more I train, the luckier I get. You know, just put in the time, and then a lot of that stuff will go away. And, you know, some people are always going to have that self-doubt. Like I worry sometimes when I go in there, but you just have to know that if you're putting in the work, you're going to get there. And it may not. And I think a lot of people focus too much on winning and losing as a benchmark. That's really not. It's nice to win, but that's not what's telling you whether you're getting better. I mean, if a person fought Sean all day long and they lost all, then maybe they're like, well, I'm not that good. I'm like, that's not the benchmark. It's like, did you learn something? Did you work through stuff? You know, there's an approach to it, and wins and losses, especially as you're getting that prowess and that ramping, is not the focus. And the less you focus about that, the easier it is to acquire and gain knowledge. So,
one thing I found is
I disagree. You know, I mean, ours is a sport.
Oh, go ahead, Sean.
No, I was going to say that Sven brings up a great point that, you know, I mean, we get so wrapped up in the wins and losses, you know, that, you know, I always say that, you know, body count, right? Because, I mean, ours is definitely a sport where success is largely measured by body count, right? But convenient byproduct of progress. Of just constantly being a better fighter. It is not the empirical indicator of progress, you know, winning a bunch of tournaments and all that. That's not really an indicator that you're being a better fighter. And if you're focused on just being a better fighter and you're focused on the process, and again, Tristan and I were talking about this earlier, you know, our whole sport, our training mentality for all of us and those at the top, largely is the fact that it's a process. You know, you go into a tournament, and a tournament for us, it is a measurement, but it's the measurement, right? It is, you know, a tournament is not an end all ball. You know, I mean, I think the last big tournament that any of us was really in was at Outlands Prize Tourney at Estrella. And, you know, Sven and I ended up in the semifinals, and, you know, and he ended up going on to the finals and I didn't. I was happy with fights. You know, I fought him well. In fact, I was surprised when I'd beaten him on the one, and he hit me as like, oh yeah, I guess we got another fight. But you know, I mean, I didn't measure it based on whether or not I won that tournament. I measured it based on the fact that I competed against some of the tops in the world, and I fought them well. I don't have to beat them. And again, with the being bested, and I mean, some of my greatest, I think, you know, call it performances, if you will, are fights that I lost in big tournaments where I made somebody fight for it and I gave them good contest.
Yeah, you know, one of the things that I came upon several years after I started traveling more was, and because I watched, you know, fellow fighters they were counting the body counts. They were counting all right, how many times I get into the semis of a tournament, how many times I get in the finals, how many times did I win the tournament. And, you know, I kind of thought they're almost like the stat people, like folks that go after, you know, they watch baseball because they want to memorize stats, or they watch football because they like the player stats or the team stats. And what I noticed was that it's not a very satisfying pursuit. And maybe this is just my personality, but I wanted to measure into did I do well? And then did I learn something? And of course, you can go to a tournament where you're the most experienced person in there. You could win the whole tournament. You'll never learn anything. Was that a good experience? Versus you go to a bigger tournament, very deep pool, a lot of very skilled fighters in there, and you make it maybe halfway through. You gave some good people some good fights, but you come away with some very good lessons about, all right, like Sean will say, what were your deficiencies? What did you get hit with? To me, this helped mitigate the mental problem, because I would always think, all right, if I got beaten tournament, now I've found a deficiency. I've got something to put right at the top of my list for going back into training. And how do I get that out of my repertoire? I want that done. I don't want to fall for that shot anymore. I now know what's something I've never seen before looks like. Now I can reconstruct it and figure out how to defeat it. To me, that felt like a win. When I came away with good stuff to learn from, that was a win to me, not whether I won the tournament or not. Because frankly, I've won tournaments and I've come away like I didn't learn anything. Like this was a walk. I wouldn't want to do this again. And I've gotten to and outed and came away with this. I've got great stuff to work on that's going to make me a better fighter in the long term. So I think this comes back to something we've talked on previous episodes of set your victory condition. Is your victory condition that you're going to learn and grow as a fighter? Or is your victory condition merely that you're going to win a certain fight or you're going to win a tournament? What I've seen is there's great disappointment and emotional strain when you attach yourself to beating a certain person or winning a tournament. Because if you don't, it feels like a huge belly flop. But if you turn that around and say, you know, this guy's beat me 10 times, I'm going to give him a damn good fight this time and I'm going to make him earn it. That even if you get beat, you will feel better because you know you've progressed. Or if you do actually prevail, you'll feel very good about making sure that you have gone for months and learned and improved to the point where by the time you achieve your victory, you know that it's because your process was good and that your mindset was good. And to me, that avoids all those pitfalls of being hard on yourself, starting to flirt with depression and frustration and all the things that can ball up and land right in your lap that morning of tournament time, or just before you face, you know, that opponent that you've been frustrated with because they always beat you. So it's all that stuff builds up internally. Yes, there are external factors that contribute to it, but you're doing all the hard work in here to make all that stuff happen. And so, of course, I think with any top performer, any earnest competitor, you have to take accountability and not say, well, it's their fault for telling me that they want to see me win the tournament, or it's this other person's fault for always kicking my ass. And no, it's you that's putting all that stuff in your mind. And the exercise of practice and of mental discipline is for you to purge that stuff out of your brain. Don't let somebody move into your head. Don't do that. That's a bad thing to happen. And this is where I think we can go into talking about the next part of dealing with a live fight is somebody that does move into your head. Like they are actively trying to get you into that overthinking part. Who'd like to start with this one? Sean, I'm going to throw you under the bus. This is where I wish Bronis was here because I know this is a big thing. Because we were talking before the show.
Yeah, we were talking about this.
Quite our thing.
Yeah, it's something that Bronos and Ronvalder and Alan all do particularly well. It's something that they actively do is, you know, getting into a fighter's head and, you know, playing those mind games. And they're all very good at that. Tristan and I is just not, that's kind of not our style, not our personality. You know, I think for me, you know, I'm more focused on, you know, on making sure that I'm doing my parts of the fight correctly. As I was saying earlier before we came on, you know, I can't make somebody else a worse fighter. I can only make me a better fighter. And, you know, and I, even at times when, you know, people have got that mental strain, you know, we had the crown I won last year after the pandemic when I fought Gabe in the finals. You know, we had Gabe on not too long ago talking about this. You know, Gabe threw, and we got in the finals. He threw one shot at me, and I blocked it, and then he just lost it. Like everything just fell apart, and I didn't notice, right? So I mean, he had just pretty much had given up after that point. And I didn't notice, I wasn't counting on it at all. There was never a point where I was like, oh, well, you know, he just lost his shit, so I can just do whatever I want. I just, you know, it's so much not who I am as a fighter that I, like, not only do I not try to get into somebody's head and mess with them and try to, you know, and that's all about, you know, creating doubt and, you know, getting people, you know, off their game and that sort of stuff. Not only not actively do that, but even recognize it when it happens, right? And you know, here I am. I'm just executing the best fight that I have. But yeah, there's some and like I said, Branos, Ronvalder, Alanon, all really, really good at you know, maybe I'm gonna give you a look, and I'm gonna let you, take a shot here, right? And but I'm gonna make you throw the shot that I want you to throw, and I'm gonna make you miss that shot, and and it's gonna be all this, the things you want to do. I'm gonna find out what you want to do, right? I'm gonna make you do that, and I'm gonna punish you for it. All that kind of stuff. I mean, there are definitely ways that you can get into a fighter's head. I mean, for me, I guess, I'm more likely to take advantage of those unforced errors, right? When somebody creates an error, or they've gotten in their head on their own, because, like Tristan was earlier, all of that, it's the great and powerful Oz. It's, the mighty Sean or the mighty Sven or whatever. I've got to face this guy who I've never beaten before, and he's won X number of tournaments and all this. Yeah, people are gonna, like, you're gonna be living rent free in their head. Going back to that crown final with Gabe here, one of the things that I'd said afterwards was there wasn't any room for me to get into Gabe's head, because he was taking up all that space in his head already. There wasn't room for two of us to be fucking with him, right? And when somebody does that on their own, I'll take advantage of that, and be ready to take advantage of the opportunities that are given to me. But I'm not particularly good at making people make those kinds of errors like that. And I'm not really sure how Sven's on this. A laid back Southern boy. Doesn't.
I don't try to make people make errors. I try to make people do what they're good at. Everybody has the tendencies and habits. Two swords of terrible style, first and foremost. But I try to make them throw what I think they're best at. Because if I get a little buy-in, what's up, 5-year-old? Where's mama? Where's mama? I try to make them do their tendencies. A lot of people like to cross, they like the side shot. I try to present them, and I do a little push pull. I work with Branos and quite a bit, and a lot of that is pacing and measure, and just building tendencies and habits. My sole advantage as a two-sworder is that most people are used to fighting right-handed people and some left-handed people, so they're all going to have something they're good at, what they like best, and a lot of times if you could present it and pull it out of them, it helps you. And then a lot of people have traps. They set stuff up they like to do. And to me, I love when people present traps, because I already know what they're throwing behind it. So it helps me push the fight a little along. I was like, I'm not trying to make people make mistakes. I'm trying to get them to be predictable, get them to throw what they like. To me, that's even easier to read and go with. The rest is just not jumping around like you're a spring and just being patient and waiting for your shot. My dad was telling me there's no shot clock. Be patient, push. 50-50 coin flip is not good. You want 100%. Be confident. It's not hard. It's just hard to be that patient.
It is hard to be patient.
Yeah,
sometimes.
It's a lot easier to get. It's a lot easier to get people to do what they want to do than to get them to do what you want them to do. Because we all have those tendencies, and we all have those things that we want to do. And if you can find out what somebody wants to do, and you can make them do what they already want to do anyway, it's really easy to capitalize on that.
We had a good question from Helga. It's nice to see you. One of our coaches. Haven't seen her in a while. She is on the throne now, I guess. But she came in. She had this really good question. That is to elaborate on what
she's stepped down recently.
Oh, just stepped down. Okay, hard to keep up.
She stepped down recently, but she's also in California, where they have power outages.
Oh, fabulous. Hope you're doing well out there, and Happy New Year. Anyway, her question regards to what is doing well. When I mentioned that earlier, is what is your criteria for doing well? And I can only say what I felt as I was coming up, which was I didn't want to get blown out by anybody. I didn't want to get one-shotted or humiliated. I wanted to make whoever I was fighting, if they beat me, they had to work for it. And I didn't want to, by doing that, I didn't want to fall for their best techniques or tricks or, their favorite stuff. And I wanted to hopefully take them outside of their comfort zone. And That was my personal definition for doing well. It didn't really matter whether I won or lost. It mattered that I made them work for it, or I put pressure on them and I made them sweat. And you can, if you can read people a little bit, and I know Helga can, but this is for the audience in general, you can get a good feel when you've taken somebody out of their comfort zone or you've made them turn on. And I'm sure everybody's felt this way. I know I used to feel this way. Even fighting some of the best people, you feel like they're just kind of sleepwalking because you're just not a challenge for them. If you get to that point where they have to wake up to fight you, even if you lose, you're doing well in my book anyway. Do you guys have any good tips for describing what doing well is?
I'm going to ask Sven what he defines as success.
Doing well is, to me, is a representative of goals when you're fighting. Actual items that have progressive measure to them. Something you're attempting to get better at. We always call it polishing on rock. You're trying to get better. We always hear people talk about like suck less, win more. People are, you're not trying to get really good. You're just trying to eliminate the things you're worst at. So you find the worst thing and you're like, hey, I'm working with this one or two things. And then as the small enough things are usually pretty actionable. They're pretty easy to track, 2 or 3 months. You're like, oh, this is not the thing I'm worst at. And then just keep working on improving. I think people say like, I will only be crowned or I want to be a knight. That goal is so far away that they can't see the growth. And it needs to be like, hey, maybe I don't reach on my back all the time. Maybe I, work on stance or squaring or small pieces of actual items that are easy to cover in video review that it can control growth. It helps you stay positive and with your training, because training is can be mind numbing, especially if you're working on stuff consistently and putting in some hours. So it helps to have a teacher recognize it with you, and then you have good enough goals that you can see it yourself. Doing well.
Yeah, absolutely. Sean, do you have a thought?
Yeah, I know. Yeah, I mean, success for me has what I define as success now. I mean, granted, I have a string, I have a string of victories to kind of back up some of what I'm saying. But success to me, again, we were talking about earlier, it's like, it's not about the wins and losses. Honestly, it's about people like Sven saying, you need to go fight Sean. Having some of the best fighters in the world tell other people that they need to fight me because I'm a quality fight. I'm going to give them good contest. They're going to enjoy the fight that they have. That's enough. In fact, Sven was out last year, and I was fighting with the Sword and Buckler against his Florentine, and he comes up and he's like, "You sure you want to fight me with that thing?" And I said, "This is all I got. This is all I brought." And part of my victory conditions with that right now is that it's a new weapon system for me. It's something that I'm having just a fantastic exploring. It's something that is teaching a lot about our sport. And honestly, if it's going to work, it has to work against him, at least on some measure, right? Because it's going to work against 98% of the population. But, I have to be able to fight against the top fighters in the world with this thing out where the are. And, I mean, my victory condition on that was that, Sven did not completely destroy me. He probably won every single one of the fights, but, I did not get demoralized, and I've seen that guy demoralize a lot of people. But I was able to take it and fight well and learn some stuff from it. And that's success to me.
Mm-hmm. I wanted to jump in with one thing, and that is when you start to feel and sample, because I think everybody does this. As a beginning fighter, maybe even into the intermediate fighter range, is they'll feel that kind of that mental garbage just stacking up in their head. They're thinking, I have to have a plan, and I've got to have a backup plan, and a backup plan if the backup plan doesn't work. And they start to go into this total overanalysis thing. I think they call it analysis paralysis, a bunch of catchy names for it. But when you go out and you fight a fight with clarity and you don't have that, you don't have the mental garbage, You just have, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to watch and be ready, poised to strike if I see an opportunity, and you just execute. You get a feel for, oh, that's what it's like to have mental clarity. That's what it's like not to be overthinking or not to have my mind getting in the way. Personally, I think that's what Musashi was referring to when he talked about the void of you're not thinking of anything. You don't have preset plans, no agendas. You just go out and you act with total clarity. Once you have that, and then you slip back, because you will slip back into it. You'll slip back into over planning. You'll slip back into overthinking and having mental stuff going on in your head. Maybe your car broke down on the way to the tournament. You're like, how am I going to fix it? All this stuff is going on. You'll feel the difference between, was my fight, was I in the mental clarity zone or was I in the mental garbage zone? And you'll know it. You'll know when maybe you won a fight only because your opponent had more garbage going on in his head than you had going on in your head. And you'll walk away and people go, wow, you won that fight. That was great. You know what? I didn't win that fight. He lost it or she lost it. Either way. Yeah, you'll know when you legitimately earned by good execution that's when you did well. And you'll start seeking that more and more. That mental clarity will become your focus, and you'll let go of worrying about footwork and steps and techniques and combinations and all that other basic thing. And you'll start thinking, how do I just keep my mind clear? How do I make sure that my mind, because like you said, it's 80% of your mind is what's getting you to perform at that level. And that's where being able to compartmentalize and get your broken car out of your head, get the dog that you had to take in sick because he's ill to the vet, all that stuff, you can put that aside for that moment. You need that mental clarity for that tournament or for that performance, and to get that back. I think that's a huge part of, and that's all going to be internal stuff, how you handle it, how your brain handles setting aside the stuff that you don't need. Because they have all the writings from the great warriors to talk about, don't think about the future, don't think about the past, think of just this moment. I think that's kind of what they're describing. Would you agree?
Yeah, probably it was probably 20 years ago now. I'd had a fighter that was kind of having some of those external problems, and it kind of did the earliest kind of essay writings that I did, and honestly, it's one of the best ones I have. I'll go ahead and post it up to the Coach's Corner discussion group, but it's one that I eventually called the Purity of the Field. And it talks about all of those things you're just talking about. It's like my dog is sick, and it's like it's a country western song. My wife left me, my truck broke down, my dog's sick, that sort of stuff. And you have all these things that are just baggage, right? And if you can't, those are, I'm not trying to diminish the real life things that happen to us, that kind of get in the way. But for me, the fighting field has always been kind of a sanctuary, right? The fighting field is the place that I can go to escape from those things. And I don't mean in that, we hear about this all the time about the, that sort of, thing must be a great way to get at your frustrations. And anybody who's fought at the top level of our game knows that this is a terrible place to get at your frustrations. When you come to the field angry, you're going to fight poorly, right? You never fight mad, right? And using this as an outlet for frustration and all that, it never works, right? So if you have all of these things, and again, these are very real things that come up in your life, the one place that you can go from all of that, escape, not an outlet to vent that. And the fighting field will give you that opportunity, and it'll give you that without judgment, right? And you should come to the fighting field free of that baggage, and you should honor the fighting field and your opponent enough to be able to check that baggage at the door, just leave it aside just long enough for you to just enjoy the purity of what we're doing, the elegant violence that we do, And if you cannot rid yourself of those external factors, you need to leave the field, right? If you just can't get rid of that, then you are dishonoring the field and your opponent and yourself. Check that baggage at the door and let the purity of the fighting field just like give yourself that gift of just being able to execute this elegant violence that we do. And if you can't, that's understandable, but you just have to acknowledge that, because if you're bringing that baggage to the field, it is going to impact everything about it, and you are not going to be able to establish realistic victory conditions. You are not going to be, whether it's tournament or practice, you are not going to be a better fighter at the end of the day when you are carrying all that baggage onto the field with you, because you're so consumed with those external things. You cannot fight for, you cannot indulge in the process and becoming a better fighter. Sorry, a little bit of talk.
Sven, did you have something?
Yeah. So
Sven, you got more on that?
Yeah, some of that is a byproduct experience. So when you first start fighting, a lot of that mental noise, as we call it, is you thinking about what you should be doing. Like, oh, my feet are too close together, my hands aren't high enough, with all the things that everybody tells you. You got 1,000 things running through your head about what you're trying to do. And then as you acquire more experience, then you're worried about what your opponent is doing and all that. And you're paying all these extraneous items. And the more of those things you think about and do, the less you're mentally focused inside about the actual fight, seeing stuff, you're taking time away from yourself. And as you improve, whether through drilling, practice, or whatever you do, we do a lot of rote drilling and practice to, as you get more and more fine-tuned to the things you know how to do, you think about them less. That mental noise goes away. The way we talk about it, the easiest way to describe it to people is if you were trying to, you're right-handed, try to brush your teeth, normally right-handed, you could probably read or play on the phone or any of that stuff, because it's not a process you have to put any mental thought into anymore. You practice it, you've done it enough, you know what's going on. But to do the same process with your non-dominant hand that you haven't spent any time about, you won't be able to focus away because you're too much thinking about where you need to move the toothbrush to, how you want to approach it, not trying to swallow the thing. It's such a minor skill, it takes so much mental thought that you lose focus. Like, you won't be able to read or look at your phone anymore because you're mentally having to focus on that. And so as you get better at the things you practice at, you'll find that your focus becomes more and more about the fight and less about what everybody else does. And eventually you're just doing your thing. I tell people, don't worry about it. That will come with practice and exposure, but it is something you have to work on.
And that bridges us into the second half of our discussion, which is your mindset with training and with not letting overthinking distort your training. And to bridge this in, the first thing that comes to my mind, which is being able to leave that baggage at home, set it down. And whether you have a ritual of you're getting your armor out of your bag and you're putting it on, that's when you start shedding that mental baggage. You leave the stuff off the field that doesn't need to be on the field, and you focus on what you're doing right here and right now. That is your chance to use your weekly practice to get used to turning the switch from, all right, I'm living normal life, to I'm doing what I need to do right at the moment, which is to focus on my fighting. And because if you can't switch that switch and set the baggage down quickly, you will have a hard time when the time comes where you do have to set it down. You have to, compartmentalize it, set it aside. There's a time to worry about that. It's not right now. And if you have that mindset as you go into your practice, because I know we all have trouble, our normal day can really drag onto us. It can put a tremendous weight on our shoulders. And, people do go get their armor on to vent their frustrations and to let that out. And I agree with Sean. It can be an outlet, but if you let it be the outlet should be, I'm setting down all that stuff and I'm going to go do something I'm enjoying doing. Even though I'm focused at it, I want to improve. I'm there to doing it, get better, not just to flail around and have a great time and, woohoo it. if you practice that, you'll find that SCA fighting is a kind of a meditation. It's a builds a mental discipline and a mental agility, to not let things that are bothering you bother you when you need to be not bothered by them, if that makes sense. So you're not just putting on armor and practicing footwork and movement. Yes, you're doing that stuff too, but in order to do that, cleanse your mind first, because that's something you're going to need to do when that pressure tournament comes up, or, you know, the scary opponent you get called, and okay, it's time to dump the baggage. Just get used to, nope, I got one thing to do. I'm going to go fight my best fight. I've found it tremendously useful to practice that mind part as well as the physical part. Sean?
Yeah, you know, they have a saying in them, the more we sweat in training, we bleed in combat. You know, we perform in tournaments the way we practice in training. You know, it's something that Al-Anon's mentioned a bunch on our episodes as well, that, you know, you can't conduct yourself one way in practice and then go to a tournament and expect that you're going to execute completely different from that, because you haven't trained yourself to do that. And so being able to deal with all these extra factors, that starts in being able to, you know, like we were saying, you know, check that baggage and make that assessment as to whether or not you're honestly mentally healthy enough to be trying to become a better fighter, especially at practice, you know, where we're trying to get better at the things that we suck at. And there is a certain level of I don't know, incompetency that is somewhat involved in practice, right? Because we are focused efficiencies. We're trying to get better at the things that we're not good at. And that involves a certain amount of failure, that is just, you know, part of the process. And, you know, and again, with the embracing the suck and indulging the process, you know, you have to be in a good, mentally healthy state, to make yourself vulnerable enough to go to practice and execute things that you do not do well, because you're going to fail at that a lot. And the more you fail at that, the better you get at those things. And eventually, you know, you suck less. But that's all part of the process. And that's why I think, you know, establishing good, solid victory conditions, that's something you have to actively do. It's not enough to just say, you know, okay, some days isn't enough to just say, I got to practice and I got under armor and that's my victory. Is that enough? Some days that's all the mental capacity you have. To do that. Ultimately, you know, if you're looking at entering tournaments and getting better at the tournament, put yourself in situations where you have to exercise that mental side of it, and understand how you're going to deal with you know, the external factors, you know, all those mundane factors, all the things that are off of the field. How are you going to practice checking that at the door? How are you going to allow yourself to build in the purity of the field and allow it to be that sanctuary? That is a place where you can practice that. And again, if you can't, that's okay. But you need to recognize that. And yeah, that starts at practice. You know, everything we do in tournament is a byproduct we've at
Helga had a really good question. I'm going to display it here. She said, what are the rituals or trained behaviors you all have to clear your mind or refocus in a tournament and at practice? And how do you help develop those behaviors in your students? I think this is an excellent question. And it strikes me, the second part actually strikes me as more interesting, if only for the fact that of all the people that I've known that have developed their own rituals, myself included, I don't know if I've ever seen anybody teach it or say, here's how you do it, because everybody's got their own thing that fits them. And they kind of, I think they sort of over time just kind of figure out what they like to do. For me, it was always getting my armor on, and the finishing touch was putting that helmet on. Like that was the transformation of, okay, now it's game time. But somebody else commented that music does really well for them. I've seen people go into meditation, before a tournament, where they sit with their eyes closed and they kind of are in their own world, and whatever it is they need to do inside their mind, they're doing it. The trick is, it's hard to teach because everybody's mind operates a little differently, and you can only describe it, which is, I think shows like this are really good because you can hear people describe, okay, well, what is your ritual? What do you do? It won't necessarily mean it transfers to the listener, but it may give them ideas for how to get into the habit of setting down the baggage, putting aside the stuff that doesn't need to be there, and focusing. And there's one part of that in this sentence too that also strikes me, is to refocus in a tournament. That's a tricky part. When you get shaken, when something that has happened that takes you off of your game, and now you need to get it back, like getting your balance back after being disturbed, even though you've set all your baggage stuff aside, something happened to you that shook you, and now you need to get your focus back. Would anybody like to comment on any of that?
I will.
All right, Sven, go for it.
Two Sword is a terrible style, and so everybody in it, they obviously come through we fight and teach 3 nights a week here at the house. I have a full gym and a ton of pells, so we get a lot of repetition, almost dojo-like. And our stuff for fighting is that as we dress, we all get armored up, and then we'll do a lot of stretching, a lot of shoulder stretching, specifically working on getting your range of motions in. We'll get together. Well, none of us do pick up fights to warm up. I don't like using any ounce of energy that I have. We'll discuss until we're happy with how everybody's stretching, and then when we go out there to fight, a lot of it is that big breath as you put your helmet on, and it helps bring that tension into you. And then every time we teach you disengage, as you disengage, you'll see that a lot of us rest. We pull our hands to our chest, and then that relaxed stance for us, and then everybody, that's where you take that big calming breath and just refocus to go fight. Too many people are too rushed to get back in there. Once you've disengaged, think about it, take that deep breath to get your air, make sure you're breathing, and then just reapproach, recenter, reapproach. Take deep breaths. That big breath as you're out of range really helps your body relax, especially if you're not in a tense position. You're down, your chest is back, shoulders are ready, and it just helps you bring your heart rate down, bring your focus in, walk back in. I mean, it's teachable and repeatable. It's not overly complex. Everybody has these long things. Stretch, feel good about it, get your mind right, and every time you disengage, get that breath, go fight again. Drop that tension. Nice. Throw it in fights, because we have a high volume pelling. We do 1,000 shots a hand, and there's tons of people who are very good at SCA who cannot do that because of the amount of tension you have to throw for that long, and tension will get you tired. And that's what Vanos and Alana are very good at. So applying that tension, making you hold your breath, and then a good fighter will die easily because they tire from tension. So don't be tense. Relax.
Yep. One story that
I think
breath. Go ahead.
Oh no, I was going to say. I think one of the hardest parts about refocusing is realizing that you're out of focus. And sometimes it's you do something that you're good at, and maybe you get caught doing something, and maybe you get away with it, or maybe you don't. But there's been plenty of times where I've been right in the middle of the fight and realized that I need to just take a step back. But that other part is recognizing that is necessary. So,
absolutely. I watched a really great lecture of it was somebody who's talking about being a professional speaker, like getting up in front of a crowd and how to deal with the crowd anxiety, the fear of talking in front of a huge number of people. And he said that he'd read a study that the people that would often, out of nervousness, they would smoke. And their comment was, this helps calm me down. And they would often smoke before they would go on stage and do their thing. And there was a study that was done that said that it's not the nicotine or even the habit of smoking that reassures them. It's the taking a deep breath as they, they put the cigarette to their mouth, they take a deep breath and exhale. And they tried it on a group of people and said, without the cigarette, without the gesture, just take a deep breath and let it out. And they noticed the same results of the people that were smoking. So even if you have to take a step back in the middle of a fight, get your range, take a nice deep breath and let it out, that can help you refocus and lower the nerves, help lower the blood pressure and heart rate. May not be by a lot, but it does a noticeable amount for helping you refocus and regain your calm if you're starting to get a little anxious. And I think Sean has it exactly right. As you start getting used to knowing yourself, you'll spot that right away when you're not quite right. There's that mental clarity has been disturbed just a little bit. But when you first start noticing it, you probably get full on nerve racked and don't notice it until you're almost shaking, or there's some remarkable thing within your mind that you can say, all right, I know things are not going well here. But consider that a practice. The more you do it, the more you'll notice even small disturbances, and you can step back, get your calm back very quickly. Initially, it might take a while for you to do it. It might not happen in a couple of seconds, might not even happen during a fight at all. But the more you practice it, the more you'll be able to get back your center and your mental balance when it's been disturbed a little bit. Like everything, just takes practice.
Yeah. Sure. I'd like to go back to some of the ritual stuff that we were talking about. Things, we were talking about, like, how do we, like, what triggers do we have, or what mechanisms do we have? A couple of examples of this. So there's a for Love the Game, Kevin Costner. He's a baseball pitcher on a perfect game. And as he goes out after at the beginning of every, he's playing the game, right? And there's all the noise that's going on, and all the stuff that is happening. And steps up on the mound, and he says, the mechanism. And it's this thing, and all of a sudden everything just goes away. All of this noise and all these distractions and everything, it just goes away. And that's something that as a pitcher, that's, he would have developed that over time to find whatever it is that he does. So it's, like Tristan said, every fighter is different. Everybody's got their own grounds that are going to influence, like, how that gets created. But I think it's enough to know that you do need to create that for yourself, whatever that ritual is, and however it is you turn that off. And we talked this in a recent episode too, that, like, have those kind of rituals. Those are things that have just been developed over time. For me, there's been different methods that I've used over time, and eventually it just, through practice and fighting a lot of tournaments, I just kind of got to that point where when you say it to me, that's just flagging my programming. One of the other ritualistic things that I kind of want to mention is, basketball players' free throws, right? You get into the free throw basket, and there's always this crazies underneath the basket. They're with arms and, got their clackers or whatever, and they're just doing all this just ridiculous shit to try to distract somebody at the free throw line. And all of the best free throw shooters in the NBA, you'll notice that all of them have some kind of ritual for doing their free throws. Karl Malone with the Utah Jazz, some of the highest career points in the NBA. Karl Malone had this thing where he was doing free throws where he'd step up in the line, he'd bounce the ball 3 times, he'd spin the ball backwards in his hands a couple of times, and then he would mutter something. And they had lip readers that no one could ever figure out what it was. And it was a thing that he did, like, every time he goes to throw a free throw. This is a ritual that he does. And while you've got these people under the basket behind it that are, we don't see all of that. It's just bullshit. It's fun for them to try, but professionals that are focused on what we're doing, we don't see any of those distractions. I mean, we've had, I've had crown tourneys where I'm off on the sidelines. Somebody is playing a guitar off on the side there, and not fighting, it's a bit of a distraction. But when I'm in the fight right there, I don't hear it. I've never heard any of that. There's never been that thing where I'm like, oh my God, why would this guy stop playing a guitar? But there, I notice it much more when I'm on the sidelines, not actually fighting. So once we get in there and we start executing, all that stuff just goes away. And it is definitely a process to figure out how do you need to clear that out. But I think it's important enough to know that you need to find what your process is.
Yeah, and I wouldn't try to overthink a ritual. It's just kind of do what feels comfortable for you to do, and let it sort of evolve. Helga had another good set of questions here, and I'm going to show these two. So common tells, she's looking for what are common tells in the fighter community that someone is nervous or wound up before a fight. For example, what to look for in your students so you can help step in and help create ritual or relaxing behaviors for them. To me, it's anytime they start acting not like themselves, getting fidgety, doing the same thing repeatedly over and over again when they don't need to. You can tell when somebody's a bit disturbed. Now, some people can be like that normally. So if they're like that all the time, doesn't really stand out. But if they start going quiet when they are not a very quiet person, when they're normally would be outgoing and relaxed or joking around, and they're not joking around and they're not saying anything, these can be indicators. The better you know somebody, obviously, the easier it would be to spot when you can feel they're a little disturbed, like their mindset is not set right. And then how to
Pacing.
deal with it. Pardon?
Pacing.
Yep.
People pacing back and forth.
Yes. Yeah. You can tell when they're pacing.
That is a classic indicator of nervousness.
Yep. When they can't sit down, all kinds of different things. When you know somebody, when they're not being themselves. And the problem is that, like everybody being different, what calms people down is different from person to person and helps get them, but usually relaxing them is a better idea, a better approach, not by being flip or necessarily trying to joke with them, but to get their mind off of whatever it's churning on right at the moment and just say, hey, what's going on? Let's, just to let you calm your mind. Here's what's about to happen, whether it's a tournament or something, and say, they're setting up the table. It'll be a little bit, just to kind of give them something else to focus on than what's churning around in their head. Usually lecturing people on, you gotta get your focus, get all the stuff out of your head that you don't need, oftentimes is not as useful as it seems like it might be. Be an example of the relaxed that they should have rather than telling them to relax, which I found telling somebody to relax almost never works. It's very hard to do, or very hard to have any success with, I should say. But if you're coaching somebody, I think the best way to do it is don't try to do it in 1 minute on when they're under the stress. Set it up with, here's how we do it here at every practice, every time you meet with them, every time you're coaching them. Say, okay, let's focus on 1 or 2 things. Don't overthink it. Relax, trust your training, and make that be the habit. They want to hear that you are calm and that you're transferring your calm to them. That's what I've noticed as being the most effective for getting people to calm down, is just you be calm. They'll want to mirror you. And so, sometimes a coach can get so nervous and racked up that whoever they're coaching gets nervous and racked up as well. So kind of the sympathy pains of the coach and the fighter. Sven, do you have any comments?
Sure.
Yeah.
A lot of that, let's just use tournament example, is routine. Like, what do you do when you come off the field? You either have someone who's, like, we have handlers for the day. They take your weapons, they take your helmet, they put them down in the shade. You sit down, you get your water. We generally watch fighting in between. Like if you're actually trying to win, pay attention to what's going on. But a lot of that is if you haven't put any practice into being relaxed in tournaments, that just comes with time. And so when I have guys come along, that's their primary thing is we'll do fights in the backyard, and then one of us will up armor, me or Rags or one of the guys, and we'll up armor. And I'll tell my guys, my sparring, I don't recommend this for most people. It's what we do, and I tell them I'm only taking 9s or 10s. You guys gotta hit me hard because I'm gonna try to put you down. So you try to put that stress and that fear and that tension, make them work. And I just put pressure on them, and you do it and practice it enough. We talk about why you're stiff, what's bothering you. You get exposed to that enough, you start to relax. And if you can relax while you're fighting, you can relax afterwards, because the aspect of fighting is not scary to you anymore. It's not bringing out that tension and that inner worry. I don't think enough people practice enough working against the adrenaline dump, or just that making the stick not scary. So many people, when they come over, especially Manpower, they're used to a foam stick. They come over here, their whole fighting computer is going, it's a rattan stick. It's a stick. That's all they can think about is they're worried about being hit with the stick, and you got to back away from that and fight your fight. And a lot of that's just really the tension is don't worry about the stick. That's what happens in a sword fight. People get hit.
Yeah.
Yeah. Tristan, you'd mentioned the when to kind of jump in and intervene and kind of get somebody to calm down. The other day, a friend of mine sent me something on what's called the crisis cycle, which is this kind of bell curve of a triggered response, and then the panic, and then the calming down, and after the calming down, and there's this other little dip that is it's kind of this post-crisis recovery sort of thing. And eventually you kind of get back to a base state. But yeah, you don't want to take somebody at the peak of panic and like you said, telling them to calm down at the peak of panic is not going to calm them down. And you may very well just kind of have to wait for that post-panic crash to happen and that recovery to get back to that base state, to be able to say, okay, do you remember what that felt like, to be able to do that, and maybe try to head it off at the pass. And family counselors talk about this sort of thing all the time, with when my children decide to escalate something, and there are several different stages of that kind of end up in this crescendo, that it's hard, because it's just so easy to it's an easy trap to fall into, and when you're in that crisis cycle and you're in that peak of panic, you're not thinking straight, right? You're not making good sound logical decisions at that point, because everything is just emotionally based, and yeah, that's just not the time to try to tell somebody to calm down, because that's not going to work.
Right. And the higher the peak goes, the more you have to wait. It's right. The drop off, it can happen fairly quickly, but it's not instant.
Yeah.
And that's why, as you have experienced this, I'm sure we all have, the more you let yourself get drawn into that curve, the longer it takes to get out of it. So avoidance is a big part of it. But
yes,
I did want to cover a bit of how overthinking tends to distort our training. And I've seen people go through this. It's not something that I've experienced very much, because I tend to organize what I want to do at a practice. But I've seen people come in and be like, I want to work on this and that and the other, and I need to fix up this habit, and I do this poorly. And they come in with this. If they wrote it on a piece of paper, it would look like just a jumble of all kinds of different words of things they want to all work on at one practice. And that page changes drastically from practice to practice. It's like they're did a brain dump of everything they want to fix about their fighting in one session. And what I've seen is it makes their practice very low productivity. They don't get anything out of it. And then they leave frustrated because they don't feel like they fixed anything when they tried to do everything. And so I think the same overthinking or garbled mindset can disrupt your normal training procedure or practice on a constant basis. And if your practices are like that, what do you think your tournament performance is going to be like? It's going to be exactly the same. You're going to get all this garbage in your head. You're going to have way too much stuff for you to process. And when you try to process all of it, you'll process none of it, and you're not going to perform very well. So much about how you go to practice will translate into especially the mindset of when you go to do fight in tournament. If you're organized and you don't try to bite off more than you can chew in a practice, I think you're going to have a much better time when it comes time to perform than you would if you try to fix everything about your fighting in one or two practices. Thoughts on that one? Maybe Sean?
No, I think you covered it pretty well there. Yeah, that's kind of what I was looking at there. Is you gotta, when you hit that peak of stress, and that's kind of the whole point of this episode is, how you deal with that stress, and sometimes you have to do it in a after action. You have to do it in kind of a postmortem, and just go over it after you've had a chance to kind of wind down. That could be, days after you're at practice, to figure out, how you're dealing with that. And again, that kind of goes back to, the opponents you face and the history you have with people. And, every time I fight this person, I get hit really hard, or, I've never been able to beat that person, or that sort of stuff. And that all leads up to that crisis cycle. And to, Sven's point earlier, like all of this, it just takes practice. I mean, all of this, you have to be exposed to it more, to figure out how you're going to deal with it. Because honestly, a lot of this stuff that we're talking about, these things that happen in our fights, you don't know how you're going to respond to some of these things until it happens to you. If you're lucky, you're going to be able to see how somebody else has dealt with some of these situations, and how they responded to that, for good or for ill, right? Sometimes you look at how somebody dealt with a certain situation, and if you see somebody storming off the field and throwing their helmet, and doing a total yard sale after a fight because something, because too much brain strain, right? Something didn't go right. Not even the winning or the losing of the fight, but something didn't go right, and they have a total yard sale. You may want to look at that and say, let's not do that, right? If you're lucky, you can learn from the mistakes of others. But a lot of these things, you are not going to know how to deal with it for yourself until you're exposed to it, until it happens to you. And, and the more different types of difficult situations you get into, we've all seen a lot. We've all been doing this for a long time now, and we've seen a lot of different things, and we know how we handle it, but that doesn't mean that that's the way that somebody else is going to handle it.
Yep. Sven mentioned something earlier too, which was, now I'm blanking on it. Dang it. You had some good points there, but when you do your practice, that's what it was. The nervousness on tournament day is reflective of you not being well prepared, or feeling that you're well prepared. That comes out of how you organize your practice, that you set your little list. And I say little because what I felt worked for me was I'd go into a practice with 2, maybe 3 things, specifics that I wanted to work on. I wasn't trying to fix my entire fight. I just wanted to do 2 or 3 things, and then spend some time sparring and having fun, because at the time we were doing almost all sparring was our practice. But I forced myself into, all right, there's a couple things specifically that I really want to work on, and I'd focus on those things. And therefore, within the hour and a half, 2 hours, I could work on them. I could see a marked improvement, because what you work on, you'll improve. And then I could say at the end of practice, okay, this was productive. I know I'm better than I was when I came into this practice. And I know that these things that have been bugging me on my deficiencies list are smaller now, or I've maybe not eliminated them entirely, but I feel like I've made good progress towards them. After you go through a series of practices like that, then comes tournament time. In your brain, you're thinking, I have prepared for this. I've taken care of the deficiencies that took me out last time, and now I'm prepared. Now it doesn't necessarily do overconfidence. You don't want that either. But the idea of I'm not in the same boat I was at the last tournament, or when I spotted those deficiencies, or I got bested. I've got better tools now. I'm better equipped to deal with this tournament. That's what I felt gave me my confidence and let me not go into a tournament feeling like I don't even know what I'm going to do. I know I suck. I'm not any better than the last time, and I know I failed last time. Like, all of that was set up in the practice phase before you get into the next performance. And this is why, like Sean talking about the process of how you spot your deficiencies, you train them, you work that training into your sparring, you smooth out everything to get it to work with your fighting, and then you go to tournament, you find out what is not working, and then you go back to the starting line again and you redo it over and over. Like, if it's a process, now you're not just blindly hoping that you're just getting better, or having your master laundry list of everything you want to fix and then not even knowing where to start.
Well, and also by following a process like that, it especially at the tournament, it doesn't have to be this tournament, right? I don't have to win this tournament, right? Because it's like the purpose of the value of the tournament is to isolate those deficiencies. So if you're at that tournament and you're taking that into account, and you're trying to use that to just get an evaluation of where you are, then you don't get caught up in the I have to win this tournament because where you can just say, look, I'm going to go and enter this tournament, and maybe I win, maybe I don't, and if I don't, then I'm going to find out why, and we're going to go ahead and fix that. So if you're entering tournaments and you're indulging in that process, then you don't get caught up in the it has to be now, it has to be this tournament, I have to win this thing.
Mm-hmm. Sven, do you have a comment? No? We did have a good comment that was listed on Facebook here. It says, an odd thing that I do as part of my ritual is to ask one of the other fighters I know to blast me with a good solid headshot after he's armored up, of course. This is mainly to get rid of any lurking fear of injury and remind me to trust my armor and protect me. There are some people that do not fight cold. They have to go and fight 5 minutes of warm up, some good sparring to really get the blood going. Some people like to get a good blast to the head to kind of wake them up. I've seen people that get that blast in the first fight of their tournament, they lose, and then suddenly their spirit awakens and now they can go fight well. So they try to get that, usually when they know that about themselves, they try to get that out in a sparring fight or before it's in the tournament. But boy, everybody's different. And I've seen some people that go fight from cold really well. It's a grab bag. You have to kind of get to know yourself of what brings out your best. And it takes a little time to find that out, some trial and error. But yeah, I've seen people get give me a blast in the head and kaboom, and like, all right, now that wakes them up. It's kind of fun. Sean?
No, I didn't really have anything else on that. I've definitely that they just need a trigger to get them thinking. I know I've had actually most of the crowns that I've fought in and most of the crowns that I've won, I've ended up being taken a lot during the list where it refocuses me and let's all right, I'm one down and got to do something about that. And that usually is a bit of a trigger for me. And yeah, curiously enough, I mean, I'm not one of those who said, well, that I've, in fact, I think there's only been one crown that I've ever had that I didn't lose a fight, where somebody hits me and like, all right, time to refocus this. And so,
Sure. Well, we're getting to the wrap up point. Sven, was there anything you wanted to wrap up the episode with?
Yeah, I just wanted to tell people, like, this is not a one-person process. Like, some of the stuff you can't do by yourself, especially when you're newer. It's best to have a student, teacher, or someone to help you with. And so, like, I use my wife. She's probably seen me teach the system to more people than anyone alive. And so when we come off the field, we have discussions. So don't think you got to learn this stuff in a vacuum, or that your friends can't help you. Video obviously helps, but learn to trust someone, or learn to have everything is set up around a system. We talk about processes this whole time. Establish them, find out what works with you, and ask questions. Someone did it before you. Get there. That's it.
Cool. Sean? Are you there? There we go. Like a little bit of a lag. Do you have any comments, Sean? Wrap up?
I'll be breaking up. Might be a little off. I'm getting a bit of a delay on pretty much everything tonight there.
Okay.
No, I think this has been a great discussion. I've been talking about this for about a half hour before we came on. And again, ours is sport. Execution is largely mental. I mean, everybody has to figure out how they do practice, and it at multiple points during your fighting career. So practice it, and just try to don't be afraid of it, and don't worry about it when it happens. Just figure out how you're going to deal with it.
That's a very good tip. One last thought I wanted to wrap up with is the mental game, I think, is a lot like weightlifting. When you try to think too much, it's like stacking way more weights onto a bar than you can possibly lift. The tricky part is take extra weight off, lift what you can lift, put a lot of the stuff that you don't need to be thinking about out of your mind. It'll be hard initially to sort out, okay, what should I be thinking about? What shouldn't I be thinking about? But don't be afraid to cut away and just say, I'm going to focus on one thing. Focus on one, maybe a second thing, but don't overload your mind. And I'm sure you'll feel it when you get overloaded, when your brain's just thinking about all kinds of different things. You're trying to do way too much. Every single competitor that I've ever talked to will say pretty much the same thing about the mental game. It's pretty much don't think about it, or get as close to not thinking about it as you can. You'll never be able to get completely there, or it would be very rare that you get completely there, but you want to try. And that's a meditation kind of a thing. And I always thought that SCA fighting to me was like a moving meditation. Because of that very reason, I was practicing letting go of things that were lingering in my mind, the over planning, the overthinking, all of that stuff. You have to put that away. Observe. You can have a bit of a thought going in your head, but don't let it become too much. I think that's a solid lesson for kind of how to proceed. And this is the hardest part about teaching somebody about the mental side of fighting. You can't just show them like you can show them footwork, or you can show them body mechanics. You can't visualize and show somebody what's going on in your head. You can describe it, but it's not the same thing as watching somebody and say, I want you to copy that footwork, or I want you to move like that person does. That's easy. It's easier, but with describing what goes on in the mind is very, very difficult to do. So be patient, and don't try to become 10 times better in the next 2 weeks. Just become somewhat better, and just stay focused on that. So hope everybody got good stuff out of this episode. Of course, we enjoyed talking about it. It's intriguing to get into the mental side of fighting. And I think what Sean said is absolutely right. And I've seen this both with SCA fighting and with martial arts in general. It's about 80% mental. And the physical part is a strong part, Don't get me wrong, but most of it is what's going on in the mind. So with that, we want to wrap up this episode. We do not have an episode scheduled yet for next Friday, so I'm not sure exactly what we're going to be doing. Pretty sure we will be doing something, although I know a lot of people are kind of in the midwinter busy season, so we'll kind of see what happens. But until then, I guess we'll wrap up the show. Everybody have a good night and a great weekend. Thank you, Sven.
All right, thanks, everybody. Thanks, Tristan. Yep.